So I've now finished my reread of Assail by Ian Cameron Esslemont, finishing my reread of the novels of the Malazan Empire. Just a quick word on the series as a whole. I think it could even be called sort of, instead of novels of the Malazan Empire, which I get is sort of to tie it in with Stephen Erickson's Malazan Book of the Fallen, to let us know it's in the Malazan world. But I think the series could be called something like the Crimson Guard Saga or the Tales of the Crimson Guard, because for the most part, except for, I don't think Orb Scepter Throne has any Crimson Guard stuff. That sort of acts as a direct sequel to Toll the Hounds, giving us more sort of Darujistani setting and stuff. And of course, Knight of Knives, which acts as both a prequel to the whole series, the Malazan Book of the Fallen, but also as an endpoint for the current Paths to Ascendancy series, which puts it as sort of very strange middle point. And again, I continue to argue that I think Knight of Knives is the best introduction to the world as a whole. Aside from those two, the whole series is sort of the story of the Crimson Guard. We have Return of the Crimson Guard, Stonewielder, Blood and Bone, and then finally Assail. Now, of course, there's more in each of them, but the story follows the Crimson Guard. This one's it's a good one. It did sort of lose me about halfway through. I was feeling like it was just characters sort of walking to a place, characters trying to get to a destination. And it was kind of cool in that the different sets of characters that were all heading to the same destination, the same convergence, we sort of saw their paths overlap. We would see characters pass through a setting, and then another set of characters pass through that same setting, and sometimes encounter the same characters, same situations, and that was kind of neat. But overall, I didn't enjoy it as much as Blood and Bone, but still it was packed with like sort of lore. Like if you enjoy Malazan and you're like, should I read this one? Well, if you've read the entire Malazan Book of the Fallen and you've read every other novel of the Malazan Empire, then obviously yes, you should read this one. But it does have lots of sort of deep and interesting lore, which I will spoil profusely in this video. So the setup for the novel is there's a gold rush in Assail. So Assail is sort of this land that's been hinted at throughout the novels of the Malazan Empire, but also the Malazan Book of the Fallen. Memories of Ice, in fact, is where sort of it's first mentioned and first set up with Silver Fox and the Imass. That storyline, that thread that starts in the third book of the Malazan Book of the Fallen, finally meets its conclusion in this one. So Assail is this mythical continent. Now, Jaghut is of course also a mythical continent. Assail is mythical in that everyone sort of knows it's there, but whenever it's mentioned in any of these other books, everyone's like, whoa, Assail, like, we know there's some stuff going down there. That is a super dangerous place. And we sort of met some characters from there in Return of the Crimson Guard, almost the start of this series. We meet Kyle from the Bale Lands, which is sort of the southern part of that continent that sort of as a whole is named Assail, or at least the northern part is named Assail. And we also meet Stalker, Badland, and Coots, sort of the lost cousins, capital L, who hail from Assail. Other than that, we don't really know anything about it. So there's a gold rush. There's rumors of so much gold in Assail, and it's not just rumors, it's actually true. So it brings people from all over to this place. So we have a whole series of different characters that are all trying to get to Assail for the gold, and trying to get there, it's kind of like how they're trying to get through Jaghut and Blood and Bone, where so much magic and stuff is holding them back, and it's so many dangers and difficulties. Same thing with Assail. Getting through the Jaghut warrens and the mists and the locals, and it's a dangerous place. And we follow groups such as Falaran Mariners, Mariners from Mare, which also sounds strange, but like sort of the best of the best mariners in the Malazan world. We meet sort of ex-Malazans, we meet Blue Shields that were sort of a sister group to the Grey Swords that we know from Memories of Ice. But sort of our main characters are Crimson Guard. So we have Kaz, along with Shimmer, Blues, a whole bunch of other members that we know from the Crimson Guard, who are going to Assail because, well, first of all, they're going because that's where Calbrin is, the sort of the only lost company that's left. Iron Bars managed to escape, and throughout the Malazan Book of the Fallen, also the novels of the Malazan Empire, we get bits and pieces of Iron Bars' story of managing to flee Assail and actually escape. Well, they have Iron Bars back finally after Stonewielder And so they're taking Iron Bars and the crew, and they're going to assail to get Calibran and the rest of the Fourth. And then they'll finally have everyone in the Guard will be whole once more. However, Kaz sort of has not ulterior motives, but he knows something about the Guard, which has been hinted at throughout the whole series of novels talking about the Crimson Guard. And he knows that there is sort of a reckoning or a revelation to happen on Assail. And so that's part of the reason they're also going. Cowl's also with them. So remember, Skinner's now dead. Cowl somehow clawed his way out of an Azath house, the dead house. He's sort of crazy, but he's on Kaz's side. He hints this whole time to Shimmer. We get Shimmer's POV in this, that he sort of knows something. And I think the reader at this point has sort of clued in as to what the nature of the Crimson Guard vow is, and the nature of the Crimson Guard themselves, which is revealed at the very end of the book. We'll get to that. So we have the Crimson Guard. We also have Kyle, which his name's Kyle. That's never not going to be weird. He's also going back to Assail just because he's trying to get home. And he also wants to meet up with Badlands, Stalker, and Coots, who at the end of, I think it was the Return of the Crimson Guard, had also gone back to Assail. So Kyle's trying to make his way back. Remember, Kyle, throughout this book, he's known as White Blade because he carries sort of the sword of Osurk, this sort of glowing white sword that's like not made of metal. It's some sort of natural enamel or something, but it's also kind of like opaque, but kind of translucent at the edges, and it glows. It's really cool. And it's also like a lightsaber, like it will cut through anything super, super easily. He maims a lot of people in this. Like, people are losing limbs and fingers left, right, and center. So he's also making his way to Assail, specifically this sort of mountain range in Assail. In Assail itself, we have these locals, the Ice Bloods, who it's sort of revealed throughout the book that they are the descendants of humans and Jaghut. So they have Jaghut blood in them. That's why they're called the Ice Bloods. And at first, it seems like it's just the people way up in the north in these holdings that are the Ice Bloods, but it's revealed that sort of everyone on the continent has some Jaghut blood in them. It's just more concentrated in this northern area. And we get a story, a very much traditional sort of hero's journey, which feels kind of strange and out of place in the Malazan world, but in sort of a quaint way, like, oh yes, this traditional fantasy storytelling mechanic in the Malazan world, how cute. We also kind of had the same thing with Kyle in Return of the Crimson Guard, but in this one we have this guy Orman. He's like a young kid. He decides to leave his mom and go up north because this old bear, he was called Old Bear, who's like soul taken, by the way, he transforms into a bear. He's like, we need people to help become Hearthguards for the north. It's very like Nordic setting, which is also kind of cool. It's a traditional fantasy setting, but not something we've really seen much of in the Malazan world, so that also makes it kind of neat. And he also has a magical weapon, this spear, which has a stone head and seems to be magical. And in order for it to obey you, you need to defeat someone in a duel. And whenever you throw it, it always finds its mark. And very traditional. Of course, Old Bear dies, and Orman doesn't want to do the journey, but he agrees to do it anyways. Like, just classic tropey fantasy stuff. We also have Silver Fox and the Talana Mass. So the Talana Mass are coming to Assail because Omtos Falak, which had been sort of the Jaghut warren that had been guarding and sort of keeping this place safe for those of Jaghut blood, is breaking down, and the Talana Mass are going there to sort of wipe everyone out. There are two different groups of Talana Mass. Well, there's multiples, but there's sort of two different sides. There's a one side that is going there because everyone there is either part Jaghut, even though they're human, they've got Jaghut blood in them, and so they want to kill all of them because the perpetual war of Talana Mass versus Jaghut, never ending. And then we have another group that's sort of the good Talana Mass, which are led by Silver Fox, the summoner, who she's like 20 or something at this point, but she's in the body of a very old woman because remember, she aged really rapidly, which was great when she was a baby and we wanted her to grow up to be a woman, but now, you know, she's a young woman in an old woman's body. But she is commanding the rest of the Talana Mass, who are trying to catch up with these ones that have gone ahead and trying to stop them from slaughtering all these innocent humans just because they have Jaghut blood in them. She's supposedly the first living bone caster to be born among the Imass in millennia, and so she's has the ability to sort of bring an end to the war and release the Talana Mass, who are, of course, these undead beings that have sworn an eternal war with the Jaghut. And in Toll the Hounds, we had the Redeemer, Tovian, who being a shield anvil of the Grey Swords, managed to take on all of the sort of pain and suffering of the Imass, which of course killed him, but in doing so, he gave them hope as a species, and now they have this sort of pocket dimension realm, whatever, where their spirits can go when they are released, when they finally pass on. So there is hope for them, but this one group who is still trying to kill all the Jaghuts, they don't know about this hope that's been granted to them yet. So Silver Fox is trying to chase them down to let them know. So we also have Fisher Keltath, who has been a mysterious figure. We've seen a lot of his poetry in a lot of the epigraphs of all of these books, and he's sort of been introduced as a character now and then in different books. This one, we get a lot of his background. So it turns out that he is one of these Ice Bloods from one of the places quite far up north. That's why he's very, very old and very, very strong, is because he's part Jaghut, kind of like maybe half Jaghut. Maybe not half, because like Icarium's half, but then Icarium's like something totally different. He's also traveling north, and he also finds this shipwrecked Teist Andy, which is a very mysterious figure. Fisher gives him the name Jethis. This Teist Andy, he does not have any memories. He does not remember his own name, and so he's sort of following Fisher, and he's trying to find out who he is or why he's there, and he sort of gets bits and pieces until the very end of the book, literally the very, very end, when he figures out who he is. But the reader is sort of led to believe, because Fisher certainly believes at first, that this is Anomander Rake reborn somehow, returned by Mother Dark, because it's revealed that he has sort of got white in his hair, and remember Anomander Rake had white hair, although I feel like there were other Teist Andy that had white hair. Anyways, I will now reveal who this character is. It is Spinnock Darav. So Spinnock, who we saw a lot of in Toll the Hounds. Somehow, for whatever reason, Mother Dark has chosen him to be the new sort of champion of the Teist Andy, and have sent him to Assail in order to get a weapon. He sort of comes to this conclusion as he's gaining memories back. He's like, I've been sent here. The Teist Andy were sort of guarded and protected by a man with a magical sword, Anomander Rake, and now we need another one, so I'm here to get that sword. And throughout this whole book, all the battles that he fights, he always has a new weapon after every battle, because he's so strong and powerful that every weapon he uses shatters and breaks and is utterly destroyed. Which it's almost like I'll use the example of Arabian Nights, because I just read that, but it's a very Arabian Nights tale about the warrior who's so strong that every weapon he uses breaks, and so he will have to go to a genie or a wizard or a weaponsmith and say, hey, I need you to craft a weapon worthy of me, something strong enough that even I can't break it. And so at the end of this book, he does that. He goes to these people, which I won't get to yet. I won't say who he gets to, in case if you're watching this, hopefully you already know. But he asks them for a weapon worthy of him. Not quite worthy of him, but he asks for a weapon to defend his people. And so they agree. He gets taken away. We don't see him again until the very, very, very last page of the book, where he comes down and he's had his left arm removed. And it's like, whoa, why was this the cost for this sword? And then it's revealed that, oh, look at the sword. It's made of bone. The only sword that was strong enough for him was one made of his own bone, which is like I said, very Arabian Nights sort of tale, a very, very cool sort of short story that's spread out throughout this whole book. So that's pretty cool. So it's revealed, it's not explicitly stated, but I mean, it's if you've read Toll the Hounds, you know that this is, of course, Spinnock Darav. But he says he's going to go by Jethis now. He also says that Mother Dark has granted him the sort of title of Son of Darkness, which Anomander Rake once had. Which, I mean, it's cool that the Teist Andy have this new champion in Jethis, but to me, it's sort of granting him the title Son of Darkness kind of undercut Nimander Gullet, or was it Gullet? Nimander from Toll the Hounds, the sort of son of Anomander Rake, and his sort of journey to become what I thought was like the new Anomander Rake, the sort of the new leader of the Teist Andy. But anyways, so yeah, they're all going up north, and it's sort of revealed throughout the book. You come to the conclusion that, oh, this is a Jaghut mountain, like we are going to meet Jaghut. Like I really like the Jaghut. I really like Jaghut. They're such a cool race. And what I really do like about this book is that there's sort of hints and stuff about the Jaghut. You get a sense that, oh, this is like Jaghut lore, but there are also, even below that, even more subtle hints that, hey, the book's called Assail. Like, there's something up at the very peak of that mountain that the Jaghut might be guarding against and like keeping safe and secret. Like, you do know what Assail, like Forkrul Assail, which are another race that I think the Forkrul Assail are so cool in that they're so alien, and we do not really get to see them much. We see like one or two here or there, and the few times we see them, they blow us away. And of course, in the Crippled God and maybe Dust of Dreams, we get quite a bit of Forkrul Assail, but even with that, I feel like the Forkrul Assail are more so even than they could change him out. This sort of very alien, very unknown, mysterious beings, and it's so cool that, of course, the Forkrul Assail are the ones that grant the bone sword to Jethys. But it's so cool to see them in this book at the very, very end. So all these people are marching north, and if you haven't figured it out by now, the Crimson Guard, it's revealed, the big reveal about them and the nature of their vow, which I think you pick up on if you've read all the other books, is that they have sworn this vow on a ritual Talon site, an Imass site. And they originally swore this vow, this eternal war against the Malazans. And their vow, plus the magic they touched upon, mirrored so much the ritual of Talon that the Imass did in their swearing of an eternal war against the Jaghut, that the Crimson Guard have sort of become like Talon Imass. They're sort of Talon human, I guess you would call it. They're referred to by other Imass as the Devore clan or the Red clan. And so yeah, the Crimson Guard have to come to the realization that just like the Talon Imass, who will exist forever and sort of lose their humanity, their insanity, they lose themselves, and they lose so much that the Crimson Guard will also lose that. Sort of Shimmer comes to the conclusion at the very end that she's dead. You know, she's died, but she can keep coming back because of this vow. And all the brethren, the dead Crimson Guard that we sort of see as ghosts, they can also come back at any time, but they have not chosen to do so because that would sort of reveal that Crimson Guard are basically Talon-ified. Even Skinner can come back. And so like Shimmer's starting to realize like she's losing her humanity. She's not feeling sort of passion and emotion like she used to. So at one point in the book she goes to Iron Bars and she's like, yo, get in bed, let's see if we can spark a little something. And to me, she's just wanted the sort of that passion. She just wanted to feel something again, which made tons of sense to me. And I thought, yeah, that's great. If you feel like you're becoming an undead, eternal living warrior whose only goal is to fight, like, yeah, try and sleep with someone and spark something. But I don't like how the author then turned it into an Iron Bars Shimmer romance and how they're now in love, and whenever they had to risk their lives or almost die throughout the rest of the book, they're like, oh no, I don't want us to lose each other. Like, I think it just should have been sort of a one night stand thing to sort of see if they can feel again. I didn't like the romance. The other romance in this book was also really strange, but it could have just been Kyle being a Kyle. So Kyle, on his way north, he meets this shield maiden from a northern Genebacan city who is guarding this young boy who's sort of heir to a northern Genebacan throne, which has been conquered by the Malazans, of course. And they need each other. They're like three people stuck in the middle of nowhere, constantly under attack, and so they get close and whatnot. And eventually Kyle has to sort of flee them so that the boy can get help, and because everyone's trying to kill Kyle because he's got this magic sword, right? Everyone wants the sword. And later on, the Shield Maiden sort of becomes a commander of kind of a large army. So all over Assail, there's all this sort of ragtag people coming for the gold rush, right? Well, by the end of the book, they sort of become armies. So the Shield Maiden sort of becomes the head of an army, and Kyle stumbles onto their camp and he runs up to her and he's like, great, you're still alive, you made it, that's so cool, okay, let's leave now, come on, let's go. And she's like, dude, I'm like the head of this group of people and my whole goal is to protect this young boy, and you just want us to run off in the wilderness with you? And Kyle's like, well, yeah, because we got a thing going, right? Like, you and me, like, I really like you. She's like, no, get out of here. And so Kyle does get out of there. Romance in these books is not great. It can be, but not generally. So I spoke about armies being formed from all these prospectors. The really cool thing that really struck me, I remember the first time I read this, is one of these people that's heading up is Cartherin Crust. Now, Cartherin is, of course, one of the old card. Like, one of the highest of the high, like Decimal Tor, Whiskey Jack, Dujek One Arm, Urko, and Carther and Crust. Like, they are the guys in the old empire. So he's on his Ragstopper, which we've seen him now and again throughout the different books, and he's sort of funny, but we see him here, and ostensibly he's there for the gold rush as well. But it's sort of revealed that he's there on behalf of the empire. So it turns out that the Malazan Empire has heard about this gold rush, and so they want in. They want to sort of make relations with Assail, not conquer it, but sort of, I would say, colonize it in a way. They want in on Assail, and so Cartherin's there on behalf of the empire. And so what does he do? Like, he shows up on his ship with just his crew, but of course we have all over this continent like people from all over the world coming for this gold rush, from Lether, from Genebacus, from Seven Cities, from Quantali, like everywhere. And a lot of them are ex-Malazans. I mean, the Malazan Empire is probably the biggest empire in the world at this point. There's a lot of people who have served. So what does Cartherin do? He sort of walks into the camp, jumps up on a table in a big tavern, does a whole bunch of Malazan sort of hand gestures and signs and stuff, and walks out. And a few sort of ex-officers sort of see that, and maybe some of them recognize him, and they're like, whoa, that's Cartherin Crust, like, what's going on? And so just using his influence, he manages to, from this sort of ragtag group of pirates, looters, raiders, and prospectors, he manages to form an army of Malazans, and I just think that's really cool. And so he uses this army to sort of protect one of the key cities or towns, maybe I should say, in Assail, and then thus serves the Empire's purpose of forming relations and making them owe the Empire. Another really interesting figure we have is this woman, Mael of Gris. So she is not just Mael of Gris, this city in Quantali. She is Gris. She is the noble line of Gris. She is, I don't know what title they'd use, queen, or she would have been pre-Empire. And ostensibly she's there for the gold rush because she's like, well, I need lots of gold to sort of form a rebellion against the Malazans or whatever. But it's revealed later, and I think this is really cool, that this Mael of Gris, she ran for 30 years the academy where Claw were trained. Like, I never even thought of that. Like, we know the Claw, and it's like, whoa, the Claw, but she sort of was the one who ran the place. So like, she's high up there, but she's also there mapping things out and working with Cartherin to sort of subjugate this land, whatever Malazan's goals are in this land. And of course they sort of succeed. At the end they had to use the Imperial Arsenal. So if you remember in, I think it's Return of the Crimson Guard, when Unta was under siege, the Moranth munitions in the armory was sort of exploded and blew up half of Unta. But somehow the explosion wasn't as big as they thought it would be, and it turns out that like half the Moranth munitions were stolen by Cartherin Crust and has been on his ship this whole time. And he uses them to save this city. We also have among this crew of Malazans a sort of mysterious figure who is revealed at the end to be Possum, the former Claw Master who in Return of the Crimson Guard messed up terribly and basically was part of the reason that Lysine was assassinated. So he sort of went a bit crazy because of that, because he failed her, and kind of redeems himself, I guess, in a way in this book. He has sort of a very nice sort of, as he lays dying after he assassinated this guy, which I won't get into, but did his job for the Malazans and managed to help Cartherin out. He sort of, it all comes out that he failed Lysine, and he really beats himself up. And even Cartherin says, like, yeah, like a lot of us old guard, after Kellenvid left and Lysine took over, we sort of abandoned her, and we didn't realize how much we needed her until she was gone. That was kind of neat. We also get some sort of shade thrown at Malak Ral, which, you know, I'm always down for. There is a bit of talking about politics, and one of these Falaran sailors, who's another major POV in this book, which I haven't talked about, but it doesn't really matter. He says to someone from Genebacus, he's like, isn't it weird that Genebacus, Falar, they were conquered by the Malazans, and yet here we are fighting for the Malazans. And she says it's a weird sort of, because I know we think colonization bad, empire bad, but she gives us sort of an argument for the benefits of empire, and how she says when she was born, her world was sort of very, very small. She had the village and the land surrounding it, and she could not go beyond for fear of enslavement, death, torture, rape, all these things. But when the empire moved in, she sort of became part of the empire, and then she can sort of move freely wherever she wants. She can sign up for the military. and be treated as equally as anyone else from different parts of the empire. And of course, things aren't rosy. Things, human nature being what it is, things are still going to be bad, but there were some benefits to that. And then she says to this Falaran sailor, like, hey, like, you're from Falar, the Emperor Malakrel, he's Falaran, aren't you happy? And sort of says that, like, the Falarans had been sort of under the sway of the Gistal, these priests of Mail, for so long, and the Malazans freed us from these evil priests. And now one of these priests is in charge of the empire. So he's like, I'm not speaking that man's name for as long as I'm alive, or whatever, or as long as he lives. So I know in The God Is Not Willing that there's sort of, not Malakrel apologists, but they're like, he's not that bad of an emperor. But in this one, he's still seen as like an awful dude, which he is. You read Forge of the High Mage, he's an awful dude. You read Deadhouse Gates, he is the worst dude. So like I said, most of the book is all these groups of people just heading north. We have that little bit with the Malazans, who are ostensibly in it for the gold rush, but it's revealed they're in it for imperial reasons. They managed to save this town at the very end of the book. But the final bit that I have yet to talk about is at the summit of this mountain. So all of our characters converge, of course, as they do, at the peak. And who's also at the peak but all of these Forkrul Assail. So Silver Fox, all the Talanamas, the two sides of the Talanamas, meet up with the Jaghut. So there is a Jaghut elder there, like a full-blooded Jaghut, who's sort of been protecting this place. And all her descendants, the Ice Bloods, sort of representatives of all the Ice Bloods are there. Fisher's there, Kyle's there, who's also part Ice Blood. All the characters meet there. And they ask the Forkrul for adjudication. So the Forkrul are sort of there as witnesses to sort of end this war. And I found this really interesting, that Fisher makes a comment like, there's four, we're four again. And I'm like, what are you talking about, four? There's more than four characters. But if you take a book like Gardens of the Moon, which I am going to take a book like Gardens of the Moon, and you go to the glossary at the end of the book, it says peoples, humans and non-humans. And we have Forkrul Assail, non-human, extinct mythical people, one of the four founding races. Kachin Jamal, non-human, extinct mythical people, one of the four founding races. Imass, one of the four founding races, now immortal. Jaghut, non-human, extinct mythical people, one of the four founding races. So since the start of this world, the sort of the literary start of this world, we're introduced to these four supposedly founding races, which, while you're reading this series, you're thinking, okay, so before humans, there were the Jaghut, the Imass, the Kachin Jamal, and the Forkrul Assail. They're sort of the first races of this world. But of course, as you read the series, you realize that's not the case. There's many other different races, and in fact, these four were not the oldest, or they weren't around first. The Kachin Jamal might have been. But anyways, so what does the four founding races mean? What did they found? And if you're like me, you might have thought, well, this is just sort of soft retconning where, or maybe the reader's meant to believe that these are the four founding races, and then as you read the book, the world expands and you realize that, history isn't always just what is written. There's much more that has been lost. But in this book, we find out that the four founding races are the four races that founded this peace. So millennia ago, remember, the Jaghut had been these tyrants that had enslaved the Imass. The Forkrul Assail had been just, crazy adjudicators of peace, and by peace they mean death, and so have been killing tons of people. The Kachin Jamal had been the original inhabitants of this place and enslaved the Kachin Naruk and had built skykeeps, and there was all kinds of wars and battles, and things had been horrible. And at some point, representatives of these four people got together and founded a peace between the four of them. That's why they are the four founding races, because they have founded some sort of a peace. And at some point later on, some Imass were like, no, we swear eternal war against the Jaghut, we're breaking the peace. And so they broke the peace, made the ritual of Talon, wars started up again. Kachin Jamal sort of died off. Forkrul Assail sort of retreated from the world. And stuff got crazy. And now, here at the end of this book, they're forging another peace. So Silver Fox, as representative and summoner of the Imass, agrees on behalf of the Imass to stop the Jaghut war. And the Jaghut present, again, same thing, agrees to stop the war. The Forkrul Assail are, of course, there as well, and they agree to this only when they find the sort of memento, the amber necklace that Kyle has that has been given to him by Eriko, the Thalakai, the sort of one of the oldest of oldest races. Not one of the four founding races, but probably older than most. And the Forkrul Assail see that they sort of have sort of a, not friendship or kinship with the Thalakai, but maybe a sort of a nostalgia. And they realize that if Eriko, the final Thalakai, had given this to this boy, then for whatever reason they agreed to the peace. Now, of course, the Kachin Chimal aren't there. Kind of cool if they were, I guess. But in their place, we have Jethis, the Taistandi. So he sort of fills in as the fourth race, which is kind of weird because, like, the Taist aren't really of this world. They don't even live in this world. I think they returned to Karkanis at the end of Toll the Hounds. And, I mean, we're not even talking about the Taistadur, who would be more appropriate to be there. There's no representative of them, Taistleosin, any of the countless other races. But I guess they needed 4, and hey, we've got a Taistandi, so he fits in and agrees to the peace as well. Even though the Taistandi are not really fighting anyone at this point. So yeah, they've forged a peace, and that's it. Of course, before this peace, some of the Ice Bloods, the sort of more, I don't want to say pure bloods, but like the ones with more Jaghut blood in them, had reawakened Omtos Falak, which was really cool. And so the glaciers, which had been for millennia retreating in this world, like rivers of ice flowing at the speed of rivers, glaciers just shooting down from the top of this mountain, spreading across the land and sort of encasing it in ice to protect from the Imass. So that also happened, and that was really cool. And that's what Cartharin Crust used his Marath munitions to protect this town from, the massive walls of ice. So yeah, so that ends Assail, which is sort of the first book we get that's chronologically set after the events of the Crippled God. So it's quite early. We don't see all the changes to the Warrens and the Pantheons yet, although there are references to Tog being sort of retreating from this world. I think he's the only god that's mentioned at all. And Hood's not even mentioned much in this, which of course he wouldn't be because he's dead. There are some Warren magics. The Crimson Guard, some of them can still use their Warrens, so things haven't gotten quite as changed as they do 10 years later in The God Is Not Willing. But this is sort of our first taste of the post-Crippled God world. And like I said, while the story might not be, it's not bad, but it's not amazing, there are so many little lore tidbits and little neat things in there that if you want a full picture of the Malazan world, like, you need to read this book. So the next one I'm going to read is, of course, The God Is Not Willing. So I have read that one before, but chronologically it's set right after this one, so it lines up perfectly. Also, I'm going to reread it because, of course, we have No Life Forsaken, the second book in that new tetralogy, coming out in about a month's time from the recording of this video. So yeah, that's all happening. Very, very exciting. Crazy to me that we still have Malazan stuff coming out. It's a great time to be a Malazan fan. So that was Assail, the final book of the novels of the Malazan Empire by Ian C. Esslemont.